Hey everyone, welcome back to Engelbard Gaming. After a few videos about disappointments in the last month, I think it's time to head back into positive territory. Today I'll be looking at 6 video game sequels that were better than the originals. You might think you'll see Street Fighter 2 or Ghouls and Ghosts in this video. If you think that, well, you're wrong! Those 2 games are amazing and would easily be near the top of any complete list of great sequels. But I've done a lot of videos on those games in the last year or so I'm going to save covering them for later. There are plenty of examples of great game sequels out there on classic systems, so obviously this isn't going to be a comprehensive list and feature all of them. Instead, I'm just going with some awesome sequels that I haven't covered as much lately, and I'll probably do more videos on this topic in the future. Alright, enough chatter, let's get on with it. Yes guys, I like the Super Nintendo and I think it has plenty of great games, and Nintendo's 16-bit Zelda title is absolutely one of them. I thought the original NES Zelda, which we're looking at now, was great back in the day. It was something new and fresh in the console world, and it was a long, in-depth adventure compared to a lot of games that could be completed in 10 to 20 minutes on the system back in those days. I thought the sequel, Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link, which is very different, was also great and played it a ton back then. But for the third entry in the series, which a lot of Zelda fans think is the absolute best, Nintendo went back to their roots and delivered something like a supercharged version with the play mechanics of the original. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past returns to the overhead view of the first game and is a heavily refined and updated take on the formula of that one. Free of the constraints of the 8-bit NES and small cartridge sizes, Nintendo cooked up a 2D adventure for the ages. The animation is really good this time around, the graphics are full of personality, the music is excellent, and this is just the Zelda series at the top of its game. The whole Dark World twist about a third of the way through was also great, but probably spoiled for almost everybody since they actually have it on the back of the box. This is just about a perfectly executed adventure, and there's a reason it's so beloved today. Is it the best in the series? Well, it's definitely up there. Personally, I'd say it's a tie between this and Ocarina of Time. They're both amazing games. If for some reason you've never played The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past on the Super Nintendo, Game Boy Advance, or through its digital download versions, it's an absolute must. Try it out. If you like adventure games, you'll love this. Yeah, I know I've talked about this one, but it's been a long time. The original Streets of Rage, also known as Bare Knuckle in Japan, was a decent brawler for the Genesis/Mega Drive, but I honestly was a bit disappointed with this one when it came out. The characters were really small, each level was kinda long, it seemed longer because there was only one scene in each, and it had a low frame rate for a game of this type back then. The moveset was also a bit limited, and graphically it just didn't look so great. Now, Streets of Rage did well because it came out around the same time as Super Nintendo Final Fight, so Sega could brag that their flagship brawler was 2 players at the same time and had 8 levels. And yes, the Yuzo Koshiro soundtrack is great even in this first game, so it definitely does have that going for it. I always thought it was good, but I wanted more. Just about a year later, 1 year, Sega went from that to this. It's amazing that these 2 games are even running on the same hardware. Streets of Rage 2 was just better than the original in each and every way. The characters now had special moves a la Street Fighter 2, they had way more standard moves, there were more characters to pick from, the graphics were just downright incredible, and the music is some of Yuzo Koshiro's best work ever, topping the original easily in my opinion. This is my favorite side-scrolling brawler ever for any platform. It's not absolutely perfect, it could use a few minor tweaks here and there, like I think they should have had less of a delay between standard punch attacks for the characters, but everything is so sleek and polished that to me, this just stands as the absolute best game on the Genesis platform to this day. Streets of Rage 2 is amazing. If you've never tried it out, go fix that right now. You might also want to look for Streets of Rage Remake, which is an unofficial game that Sega killed back in the day for those who think they're so friendly to fan games. That one is great, and I'll probably cover it more on the channel in the future here. But for now, yeah, Streets of Rage 2, one of the best sequels ever, some of the most improvement from the first to second game ever. Back to Nintendo. Metroid on the NES was another classic, and I also loved this when it was new. I was either 11 or 12 when I played it for the first time, and I remember calling my friend and bugging him, asking him where to go and where some of the items were. I was new to the NES at that point still, having only had it for about less than a year, and I loved the long adventure and all the secrets that there were to find in this game. It just felt way different than anything else I'd ever played before. Still, I remember being super frustrated by a host of long, nearly identical hallways and getting lost in Metroid. Several years later, and after a sojourn on the Game Boy with Metroid 2, Nintendo released the third Metroid game, Super Metroid, for the Super Nintendo. This game had been in the #1 spot on a few best games of all time lists. Hell, it helped put the Metroid name into the colloquial name of the genre these days, Metroidvania. Much like A Link to the Past had refined the original Zelda's formula to an astonishing degree, Super Metroid did exactly the same thing for the original Metroid formula. The visuals got a tremendous upgrade. The physics are incredibly complex, which led to a whole bunch of speedrun tricks that we see these days. The game added a map to the mix, and the areas looked way more distinct. There were loads of power-ups and secrets to discover, more boss fights that were way more impressive than the first game, and more. Super Metroid is a classic, and it deserves all of the love it gets. Having said that, I personally think that Zero Mission on the Game Boy Advance is the best of the 2D Metroid titles out there. I love the way that game streamlined the controls and updated the original game, and it looks and sounds even better than Super Metroid. Still, that takes nothing away from the towering achievement that is Super Nintendo Super Metroid, which is a game, like all the games I'm showing you today, that everyone should play, and a sequel that absolutely improved on the original incredibly. The original Virtua Fighter was kind of mind-blowing when it was released into the arcades back in 1993. Despite some rough edges in the home port for the Saturn, I thought it was equally as amazing that we were playing such an accurate conversion of the game on the newly released hardware just about a year later. The Saturn version hit Japan in 1994, and we'd get it in the US the following year. Before games like Virtua Fighter and Virtua Racing, polygon games were often associated with low, sometimes single-digit frame rates, and very crudely defined characters and objects where it was very difficult to even know what they actually were. To see something like Virtua Fighter was shocking, and that's part of why in 1998, Virtua Fighter was inducted into the Smithsonian. For realsies, I'll have a link in the description. Now, how did Sega follow up Virtua Fighter? Well, with Virtua Fighter 2, of course. This came out a year later on the new Model 2 hardware and looked like this. This was a shocking technological leap for a single year. Just like Sega had wowed everyone with the leap from Virtua Racing to Daytona, they blew a lot of minds with the giant leap from Virtua Fighter to Virtua Fighter 2. The Model 2 arcade board powering this game allowed for more polygons, texture mapping, and it ran at almost 60 frames per second, double the frame rate of the original, even with all those new additions. For a long time, this was my favorite one-on-one fighter, and it's definitely one of the all-time classics if you ask me. If you want a textbook example of a sequel that just blows away the original, look no further. Now, the Saturn version is also worth talking about here. It was equally amazing for its platform, even though it was obviously not as good or as complex as the arcade version visually. We lost a lot of stuff like the moving bridge and shun stage, and the backgrounds are all now 2D layers instead of polygons, but it still looks and plays great, and it actually runs at a slightly higher resolution and frame rate than the arcade original. Virtua Fighter 2 was absolutely amazing for the time, whether you played the original arcade Model 2 version, which definitely looks the best, or this Saturn port, which is just one of the best fighting games made for that system. Another truly amazing sequel. Fun fact for you youngins out there, we didn't get the original Final Fantasy here in the US until July of 1990. By then, Phantasy Star 2 had already come out for the Genesis months earlier. NES Final Fantasy was groundbreaking when it was originally released in Japan for the Famicom, but not so much in 1990. I still thought it was a good enough game for when it was released, but the antiquated nature of its play mechanics definitely brought it down a peg or two. These days, I still like it despite its quirks and have played many versions of it that fix the issues of the original, including the Pixel Remaster. The Pixel Remaster is the most recent, having come out only about 5 years ago as I record this, and I actually went through the trouble of getting the Platinum Trophy for it on the PS5. but I do want to add that one's not perfect. Anyway, back to the NES. Something funny happened after Final Fantasy I. Square and Nintendo skipped the original Final Fantasy II and III from the Famicom. They did bring over Final Fantasy IV for the Super Famicom as Final Fantasy II here in the US for the Super Nintendo near when the system launched. This led to a few things. Many of us back then had no idea there were other Final Fantasy sequels for the Famicom in Japan, and we thought what we got on the Super Nintendo as Final Fantasy II actually was the second game in the series. The internet, as we know it, did not exist in those days, and magazines didn't often go into those kinds of details. So it seemed like a huge leap from the first game to the quote-unquote second. But even if we take those Famicom sequels into account and we stick to calling this game Final Fantasy IV, it was still a huge improvement over all 3 games that preceded it. What was new in Final Fantasy IV? Well, it had an engaging story that borrowed more than a bit from Star Wars and a mix of fantasy and sci-fi that was pretty unique for the time, especially in US console RPGs. Final Fantasy IV introduced the ATB, or Active Time Battle system, where each character had a stat that controlled how much time occurred between their turns in battle, and every action also took a certain amount of time to execute. This applied to both player characters and enemies. It really felt revolutionary when it was new. The graphics were, well, just kinda okay, honestly. They were more like what I'd call NES Plus rather than SNES level. We still had some Mode 7, which the game even opened with, and other graphical niceties here and there combined with very NES-ish tile maps. The music, however, was out of this world and remains one of my favorite RPG soundtracks to this day. It's easy now to go back and look at this game and find it to also be a bit archaic, especially with the many common RPG tropes and repetitive story beats, but back in 1991, this was like high cinema for console RPGs. There's a reason we have versions of this game for the SNES, WonderSwan, GBA, PSP, mobile, DS, and the multi-platform Pixel remasters. If you're even remotely interested in RPGs and haven't played Final Fantasy IV, I heartily recommend it. Personally, I'd recommend the 3D remake that you can get on Steam, Android, and iOS these days as the best way to play it. Again, it's August of 2026 as I record this, so who knows, maybe there'll be another even better version in the future. But Final Fantasy IV is another great example of a sequel that is just vastly improved over the original. And finally, I'm going to end with a game that helped define a genre. But after having a lengthy debate with myself on what to include as this final game, I've settled on Castlevania's Symphony of the Night, which I'll just call SotN from now on. Now, as a game that is but one entry in an entire lengthy series of games, there were many Castlevania games that preceded SotN. We had 3 games on the NES, 1 on the MSX, 2 for the original black and white Game Boy, 2 on the Super Nintendo, 1 on the Genesis/Mega Drive, 1 on the PC Engine Super CD, 1 on the X68000, and technically even 1 in the arcade, along with ports of some of those games across platforms. SotN is a direct sequel to the PC Engine Dracula X Rondo of Blood, so that's why I'm showing you that one right now. Rondo was a traditional Castlevania game with lots of secrets and optional branching paths. Despite all that, it was a pretty normal Castlevania action title. SotN turned the series on its head by becoming the Vania part of the Metroidvania genre name. Iga and his team reimagined Castlevania as more Metroid-like with ability gates and a bare-bones fast travel system. We take control of Alucard, who was last seen in Castlevania 3 on the NES as an optional character that you could recruit and play as. SotN's Alucard is much different, however. He's agile, elegant, and has smooth, detailed animation, and can wield a huge variety of weapons and items. When SotN first came out here in the US, it was kind of a flop since everybody wanted all those newfangled polygonal games at the time. But thankfully, word of its greatness spread, and it eventually ended up becoming a hit that would spawn another 6 games that sort of use it as the template on the Game Boy Advance and Nintendo DS. And we've also got Castlevania Belmont's Curse coming out later this year. Aside from all that, let's not forget Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, along with its sequel that is also supposed to come out later this year, but we'll see. While those games are technically not Castlevania games, they are managed by Iga, and he did set out to basically make unofficial sequels to SotN with those. SotN helped popularize a genre that had hardly any games in it at the point that it came out. Now, in August of 2026, as I record this, there is an absolute glut of Metroidvanias, and the genre is a favorite of the indie scene. There was also, of course, a Saturn release of SotN, and that was the very first version that I played in its original Japanese. I did play the PlayStation version too, but not until about a year later, and these days, I'm equally likely to play either version. Well, the PlayStation version was a little technically superior to the Saturn version, but the Saturn version had a little more stuff in it. But some might argue these days that with the ROM hacks of the Saturn version, that it might actually be the superior one. But for me, it doesn't matter. The PS1 version was first and easily the most popular. So if for some reason you've never played SotN and you're a fan of video games at all, I say, hey, drop what you're doing, go find that game right now. It's available on modern platforms everywhere except for the Switch, and go start Alucard's adventure. It's still absolutely amazing, almost 30 years after its release, and is another sequel that just incredibly upped the ante for the entire series. So there we are, folks, 6 sequels that were way better than the game or games that came before them in their respective series. This is a topic I can easily revisit time and time again, so expect this to become a series. So what about you fine people? What are some of your favorite game sequels? Is there anything you think should absolutely be a part of future episodes? What do you want to see the most? Tell me all about it in the comments. And on top of that, join my Patreon and I'll run polls about what games to include in future episodes of this and other series, and you'll have a direct say in those. That'll do it for this video, my retro gaming friends. If you enjoyed the video, please like and share it online somewhere. It's about the only way to help my little channel here grow. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of my videos. If you want to support the work that I do here, you can do that on Patreon, Ko-fi, or right here on YouTube through things like channel memberships and super thanks. With that, I'll say thanks for watching, and see me later.